Fuel oil or heavy oil is a fraction obtained from petroleum distillation, either as a distillate or a residue. Broadly speaking, fuel oil is any liquid fuel that is burned in a furnace or boiler for the generation of heat or used in an engine for the generation of power, except oils having a flash point of approximately 40 degrees Celsius and oils burned in cotton or wool-wick burners. In this sense, diesel is a type of fuel oil. Fuel oil is made of long hydrocarbon chains, particularly alkanes, cycloalkanes and aromatics. The term fuel oil is also used in a stricter sense to refer only to the heaviest commercial fuel that can be obtained from crude oil, i.e., heavier than gasoline and naphtha. In Australia, the term distillate refers specifically to diesel fuel classes. Although the following trends generally hold true, different organizations may have different numerical specifications for the 6 fuel grades. The boiling point and carbon chain length of the fuel increases with fuel oil number. Viscosity also increases with number, and the heaviest oil has to be heated to get it to flow. Price usually decreases as the fuel number increases. Number 1 fuel oil is a volatile distillate oil intended for vaporizing pot-type burners. It is the kerosene refinery cut that boils off right after the heavy naphtha cut used for gasoline. Older names include coal oil, stove oil and range oil. Number 2 fuel oil is a distillate home heating oil. Trucks and some cars use similar diesel fuel with a certain number limit describing the ignition quality of the fuel. Both are typically obtained from the light gas oil cut. Gas oil refers to the original use of this fraction in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The gas oil cut was used as an enriching agent for carbureted water gas manufacture. Number 3 fuel oil was a distillate oil for burners requiring low viscosity fuel. ASTM merged this grade into the number 2 specification, and the term has been rarely used since the mid-20th century. Number 4 fuel oil is a commercial heating oil for burner installations not equipped with preheaters. It may be obtained from the heavy gas oil cut. Number 5 fuel oil is a residual type industrial heating oil requiring preheating to 170 to 220 degrees Fahrenheit for proper atomization at the burners. This fuel is sometimes known as bunker B. It may be obtained from the heavy gas oil cut, or it may be a blend of residual oil with enough number 2 oil to adjust viscosity until it can be pumped without preheating. Number 6 fuel oil is a high viscosity residual oil requiring preheating to 220 to 260 degrees Fahrenheit. Residual means the material remaining after the more valuable cuts of crude oil have boiled off. The residue may contain various undesirable impurities including 2% water and 0.5% mineral soil. This fuel may be known as residual fuel oil by the Navy specification of bunker C, or by the Pacific specification of PS 400. Mazout is a residual fuel oil often derived from Russian petroleum sources and is either blended with lighter petroleum fractions or burned directly in specialized boilers and furnaces. It is also used as a petrochemical feedstock. Bunker fuel. Small molecules like those in propane, naphtha, gasoline for cars, and jet fuel have relatively low boiling points, and they are removed at the start of the fractional distillation process. Heavier petroleum products like diesel and lubricating oil are much less volatile and distill out more slowly, while bunker oil is literally the bottom of the barrel in oil distilling. The only things more dense than bunker fuel are carbon black feedstock and bituminous residue, which is used for paving roads and sealing roofs. Bunker fuel or bunker crude is technically any type of fuel oil used aboard vessels. It gets its name from the tanks on ships and in ports that it is stored in. In the early days of steam they were coal bunkers, but now they are bunker fuel tanks. The Australian Customs and the Australian Tax Office define a bunker fuel as the fuel that powers the engine of a ship or aircraft. Bunker A is No. 2 fuel oil, bunker B is No. 4 or No. 5 and bunker C is No. 6, since No. 6 is the most common. Bunker fuel is often used as a synonym for No. 6, No. 5 fuel oil is also called Navy Special Fuel Oil or just Navy Special. No. 5 or 6 are also commonly called heavy fuel oil or furnace fuel oil. The high viscosity requires heating, usually by a recirculated low-pressure steam system, before the oil can be pumped from a bunker tank. Bunkers are rarely labeled this way in modern maritime practice. Since the 1980s, the International Organization for Standardization has been the accepted standard for marine fuels. The standard is listed under number 8217, with recent updates in 2005 and 2010. They have broken it down to residual and distillate fuels. The most common residual fuels in the shipping industry are RMG and RMK. The differences between the two are mainly the density and viscosity, with RMG generally being delivered at 380 centistokes or less, and RMK at 700 centistokes or less. Ships with more advanced engines can process heavier, more viscous, and thus cheaper, fuel. Governing bodies around the world have established emission control areas which limit the maximum sulfur of fuels burned in the ports to limit pollution, reducing the percentage of sulfur and other particulates from 4.5% meter per meter to as little as 10% as of 2015 inside an ECA. As of 2013, 3.5% continued to be permitted outside an ECA. This is where marine distillate fuels and other alternatives to use of heavy bunker fuel come into play. They have similar properties to diesel number 2, which is used as road diesel around the world. The most common grades used in shipping are DMA and DMB. Greenhouse gas emissions resulting from the use of international bunker fuels are currently included in national inventories uses. Oil has many uses. It heats homes and businesses and fuels trucks, ships and some cars. A small amount of electricity is produced by diesel, but it is more polluting and more expensive than natural gas. It is often used as a backup fuel for peaking power plants in case the supply of natural gas is interrupted, or as the main fuel for small electrical generators. In Europe, the use of diesel is generally restricted to cars, SUVs, and trucks and buses. However, it is very common in some areas, such as the northeastern United States. Residual fuel oil is less useful because it is so viscous that it has to be heated with a special heating system before use, and it may contain relatively high amounts of pollutants, particularly sulfur, which forms sulfur dioxide upon combustion. However, its undesirable properties make it very cheap. In fact, it is the cheapest liquid fuel available. Since it requires heating before use, residual fuel oil cannot be used in road vehicles, boats or small ships, as the heating equipment takes up valuable space and makes the vehicle heavier. Heating the oil is also a delicate procedure, which is inappropriate to do on small, fast-moving vehicles. However, power plants and large ships are able to use residual fuel oil. Use of residual fuel oil was more common in the past. It powered boilers, railroad steam locomotives, and steamships. Locomotives, however, have become powered by diesel or electric power. Steamships are not as common as they were previously due to their higher operating costs, and most boilers now use heating oil or natural gas. Some industrial boilers still use it, and so do some old buildings, including in New York City. The city estimates that the 1% of its buildings that burn fuel oils No. 4 and No. 6 are responsible for 86% of the soot pollution generated by all buildings in the city. New York has made the phase out of these fuel grades part of its environmental plan, Plan YC, because of concerns for the health effects caused by fine particulates. Residual fuels use in electrical generation has also decreased. In 1973, residual fuel oil produced 16.8% of the electricity in the U.S. By 1983, it had fallen to 6.2%, and as of 2005 update, electricity production from all forms of petroleum, including diesel and residual fuel, is only 3% of total production. The decline is the result of price competition with natural gas and environmental restrictions on emissions. For power plants, the costs of heating the oil, extra pollution control and additional maintenance required after burning it often outweigh the low cost of the fuel. Burning fuel oil, particularly residual fuel oil, produces uniformly higher carbon dioxide emissions than natural gas. Heavy fuel oils continue to be used in the boiler, lighting up facility in many coal-fired power plants. This use is approximately analogous to using kindling to start a fire. Without performing this act, it is difficult to begin the large-scale combustion process. The chief drawback to residual fuel oil is its high initial viscosity, particularly in the case of No.6 oil, which requires a correctly engineered system for storage, pumping, and burning. Though it is still usually lighter than water, it is much heavier and more viscous than No.2 oil, kerosene, or gasoline. No.6 oil must, in fact, be stored at around 100 degrees Fahrenheit, heated to 150 to 250 degrees Fahrenheit before it can be easily pumped, and in cooler temperatures it can congeal into a tarry semi-solid. The flashpoint of most blends of No.6 oil is, incidentally, about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Attempting to pump high-viscosity oil at low temperatures was a frequent cause of damage to fuel lines, furnaces, and related equipment, which were often designed for lighter fuels. For comparison, BS 2869 Class G heavy fuel oil behaves in similar fashion, requiring storage at 104 degrees Fahrenheit, pumping at around 122 degrees Fahrenheit and finalizing for burning at around 194 to 248 degrees Fahrenheit. Most of the facilities which historically burned No.6 or other residual oils were industrial plants and similar facilities constructed in the early or mid-20th century, or which had switched from coal to oil fuel during the same time period. In either case, residual oil was seen as a good prospect because it was cheap and readily available. Most of these facilities have subsequently been closed and demolished, or have replaced their fuel supplies with a simpler one such as gas or No.2 oil. The high sulfur content of No.6 oil, up to 3% by weight in some extreme cases, had a corrosive effect on many heating systems, shortening their lifespans and increasing the polluting effects. This was particularly the case in furnaces that were regularly shut down and allowed to go cold, since the internal condensation produced sulfuric acid. Environmental cleanups at such facilities are frequently complicated by the use of asbestos insulation on the fuel feed lines. No.6 oil is very persistent, and does not degrade rapidly. Its viscosity and stickiness also make remediation of underground contamination very difficult, since these properties reduce the effectiveness of methods such as air stripping. When released into water, such as a river or ocean, residual oil tends to break up into patches or tar balls, mixtures of oil and particulate matter such as silt and floating organic matter, rather than form a single slick. An average of about 5 to 10% of the material will evaporate within hours of the release, primarily the lighter hydrocarbon fractions. The remainder will then often sink to the bottom of the water column. Maritime. In the maritime field, another type of classification is used for fuel oils. MGO, roughly equivalent to No.2 fuel oil, made from distillate only. MDO, a blend of heavy gas oil that may contain very small amounts of black refinery feedstocks, but has a low viscosity up to 12 cst, so it need not be heated for use in internal combustion engines. IFO, a blend of gas oil and heavy fuel oil, with less gas oil than marine diesel oil. MFO, same as HDO. HFO, pure or nearly pure residual oil, roughly equivalent to No. 6 fuel oil. Marine diesel oil contains some heavy fuel oil, unlike regular diesels. Also, marine fuel oils sometimes contain waste products such as used motor oil. Standards and classification. CCAI and CII are two indexes which describe the ignition quality of residual fuel oil, and CCAI is especially often calculated for marine fuels. Despite this, marine fuels are still quoted on the international bunker markets with their maximum viscosity due to the fact that marine engines are designed to use different viscosities of fuel. The unit of viscosity used is the centerstoke, and the fuels most frequently quoted are listed below in order of cost. The least expensive first IFO 380 intermediate fuel oil with a maximum viscosity of 380 centerstokes. IFO 180 intermediate fuel oil with a maximum viscosity of 180 centerstokes. LS 380 low sulfur intermediate fuel oil with a maximum viscosity of 380 centerstokes. LS 180 low sulfur intermediate fuel oil with a maximum viscosity of 180 centerstokes. MDO, marine diesel oil. MGO, marine gas oil. LSMGO, low sulfur marine gas oil. The fuel is to be used in EU community ports and anchorages. EU Sulfur Directive 2005/33 EC. ULSMGO, ultra-low sulfur marine gas oil, referred to as ultra-low sulfur diesel in the US and auto gas oil in the EU. Maximum sulfur allowable in US territories and territorial waters and in the EU for inland use. The density is also an important parameter for fuel oils since marine fuels are purified before used to remove water and dirt from the oil. Since the purifiers use centrifugal force, the oil must have a density which is sufficiently different from water. Older purifiers had a maximum of 991 kilograms per cubic meter. With modern purifiers it is also possible to purify oil with a density of 1010 kilograms per cubic meter. The first British standard for fuel oil came in 1982. The latest standard is ISO 8217 from 2005. The ISO standard describes 4 qualities of distillate fuels and 10 qualities of residual fuels. Over the years the standards have become stricter on environmentally important parameters such as sulfur content. The latest standard also banned the adding of used lubricating oil. Some parameters of marine fuel oils according to ISO 8217. Maximum sulfur content in the open ocean is 3.5% since January 2012. Maximum sulfur content in designated areas is 0.1% since the 1st of January 2015. Before then it was 1.00%. The aluminium plus silicon value is used to check for remains of the catalyst after catalytic cracking. Most catalysts contains aluminium or silicon, and remains of catalyst can cause damage to the engine. The flash point of all fuels used in the engine room should be at least 60 degrees Celsius. Transportation. Fuel oil is transported worldwide by fleets of oil tankers making deliveries to suitably sized strategic ports such as Houston, Singapore, Fujairah, Balboa, Cristobal, Sokhna, Algeciras and Rotterdam. Where a convenient seaport does not exist, inland transport may be achieved with the use of barges. The lighter fuel oils can also be transported through pipelines. The major physical supply chains of Europe are along the Rhine. Environmental issues. Emissions from bunker fuel burning in ships contribute to air pollution levels in many port cities, especially where the emissions from industry and road traffic have been controlled. The switch of auxiliary engines from heavy fuel oil to diesel oil at birth can result in larger emission reductions, especially for SO2 and PM. CO2 emissions from bunker fuels sold are not added to national GHG emissions. For small countries with large international ports, There is an important difference between the emissions in territorial waters and the total emissions of the fuel sold. Meanings of bunkering. The term bunkering broadly relates to storage of petroleum products in tanks. The precise meaning can be further specialized depending on context. Perhaps the most common, more specialized usage refers to the practice and business of refueling ships. Bunkering operations are located at seaports, and they include the storage of bunker fuels and the provision of the fuel to vessels. Alternatively, the term bunkering may apply to the shipboard logistics of loading fuel and distributing it among available bunkers. Finally, in the context of the oil industry in Nigeria, the term bunkering has come to refer to the illegal diversion of crude oil by the unauthorized cutting of holes into transport pipelines, often by very crude and hazardous means.